The hammer slipped from my hand, clattering against the wooden fence as my heart lurched into my throat. Julian's fingers, warm and steady, grazed mine as he reached to steady the tool. And for a moment, the world shrank to just us, two guys in a backyard, caught in a glance that felt like a confession. I, Wyatt Thompson, 22 and perpetually unsure of myself, had no business feeling this way about my best friend's dad. It was a Saturday in late summer, the kind of day in Willow Creek, Virginia, where the air smelled of cut grass and possibility. I'd come over to help fix a fence for my friend Caleb's dad, Julian Navarro, a man who'd always been a quiet presence in my life, someone I'd seen at barbecues and basketball games, but never really seen until now. Caleb had begged me to help since he was stuck at his internship in D.C., and I'd agreed, thinking it'd be a quick job. But standing here, with Julian's hand lingering a beat too long on mine, I realized I'd stumbled into something far bigger than a broken fence. Julian pulled back, clearing his throat, his dark eyes flickering with something unreadable. At 42, he was impossibly handsome, sharp jawline, a hint of silver at his temples, and a warmth that made you want to lean closer. "Sorry, Wyatt," he said, his voice low, like he was afraid of breaking the moment. Didn't mean to startle you, but the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something, told me he wasn't sorry at all. I laughed, awkward and too loud, trying to shake off the heat creeping up my neck. "No worries, Mr. Navarro. Just clumsy." I bent to pick up the hammer, my fingers trembling. I'd known I was gay since I was 15, but I'd kept it locked away, buried under small-town expectations and fear of what Caleb might think. Now, here I was, unraveling because of a man who was supposed to be off-limits. Willow Creek wasn't exactly a haven for guys like me. It was all pickup trucks, church potlucks, and whispers about anyone who didn't fit the mold. I'd spent years dodging questions about girlfriends, throwing myself into my job at the local bookstore and my art, sketching in secret to make sense of the feelings I couldn't say out loud. Julian, though, was different. He'd moved here from Chicago 5 years ago after his divorce, raising Caleb alone, and there was something about him, a quiet strength, a kindness, that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't expected. "Let's get this post in," Julian said, nodding toward the fence. We worked side by side, hammering nails into wood, the rhythm of our movements syncing like a heartbeat. Every so often, our shoulders brushed, and I'd catch him glancing at me, his lips twitching like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged with questions neither of us dared to ask. By noon, the sun was high, and sweat glistened on Julian's forearms as he wiped his brow. "You're good at this, Wyatt," he said, leaning against the fence, his flannel shirt clinging to his frame. "Better than Caleb, that's for sure." He grinned, and my stomach flipped. I wanted to tell him I wasn't here for the fence, that I'd been watching him all morning, memorizing the way his hands moved, the way his laugh sounded like home. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I mumbled, "Thanks." Just trying to keep up. I focused on the nail in front of me, driving it in with more force than necessary. My mind was a mess. Part of me wanted to run, to pretend this spark was nothing. But another part, the reckless part, wanted to see how close I could get before it all fell apart. "Wyatt," Julian said, his voice softened now, almost hesitant. I looked up, and he was closer than I expected, his eyes searching mine. You ever feel like you're hiding something? Something big? My breath caught. Was he talking about me? About himself? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it, his face tightening. It's Caleb. He's coming home early. The words hit like a bucket of cold water. Caleb, my best friend since we were kids, the guy who'd shared his snacks and his secrets, was on his way back. And here I was, standing too close to his dad, my heart racing for all the wrong reasons. Guilt twisted in my gut, but it didn't stop the ache in my chest, the pull toward Julian that I couldn't ignore. We finished the fence in silence, the earlier ease replaced by something heavier. As I gathered my tools, Julian touched my arm, just for a second. Thanks for helping. Wyatt, he said, his voice thick with something unspoken. Means a lot. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes, and left the backyard with my heart in knots, knowing I'd be back, not for the fence, but for him. That night, I couldn't sleep. My tiny apartment above the bookstore felt too small, the walls closing in as I replayed Julian's touch, his words, his eyes. I grabbed my sketch pad, my refuge, and started drawing. His face took shape under my pencil, every line a confession I couldn't voice. By Monday, I was a wreck, dodging Caleb's texts about grabbing beers. He'd gotten back late Saturday, and I'd avoided him all Sunday, terrified he'd see right through me. How do you tell your best friend you're falling for his dad? You don't. You bury it, like I'd buried everything else. But when Caleb showed up at the bookstore that afternoon, all easy grins and messy blonde hair, I knew I couldn't hide forever. Yo, Wyatt, you ghosted me, he said, leaning on the counter, his blue eyes narrowing. What's up? You okay? I forced a smile, stacking books to avoid his gaze. Just busy. Man. You know, work. He didn't buy it. I could tell, but he let it slide, launching into a story about his internship. I nodded along, my mind elsewhere, until he said, Dad mentioned you helped with the fence. Said you were a natural. My heart stuttered. Yeah, it was no big deal. I kept my voice casual, but Caleb tilted his head, studying me. You sure you're good? You're acting weird. I laughed it off, but panic clawed at me. Did he know? Could he sense it? Before I could spiral, the bell above the door chimed, and there was Julian, stepping into the bookstore like he'd walked out of my sketch pad. He wore a black button-down, sleeves rolled up, and a smile that made my knees weak. Wyatt. Caleb, he greeted, his voice warm but careful. Thought I'd drop by, see if you boys wanted to grab lunch. Caleb clapped him on the shoulder, oblivious to the way Julian's eyes lingered on me, just a fraction too long. I mumbled something about covering the shop, but Caleb insisted, and soon we were at a diner down the street, squeezed into a booth. Sitting across from Julian was torture. Every time he laughed or brushed his hand through his hair, I felt it like a shock. Caleb was talking about some concert he wanted to go to, but I barely heard him, too focused on the way Julian's knee bumped mine under the table. Was it an accident? Did he feel it too? My thoughts were a whirlwind. And when Julian asked, Wyatt, you in for the concert? I nearly choked on my coffee. Maybe, I said, my voice shaky. Julian's eyes softened, like he knew I was struggling, and for a moment, I thought he might say something to break the tension. But Caleb's phone rang, and he stepped outside to take the call, leaving us alone. The air thickened, and Julian leaned forward, his voice low. "You didn't answer my question Saturday," he said. "About hiding something." I froze, my heart pounding. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, but my voice betrayed me, cracking on the last word. Julian's gaze didn't waver. "I think you do, Wyatt. I think we both do." My mouth went dry, and I wanted to run, to confess, to do anything but sit there under the weight of his words. Before I could respond, Caleb came back, and the moment was gone, but Julian's words echoed in my head all day. That evening, I found myself back at their house, roped into a movie night by Caleb. Julian was there, of course, sitting on the couch with a beer, his presence filling the room. Halfway through the movie, Caleb fell asleep, snoring softly, and Julian caught my eye. "He's out," he whispered, a playful edge to his voice. I nodded, my throat tight, and when he shifted closer, his arm brushing mine, I didn't pull away. "Wyatt," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. "I'm not imagining this. Am I?" My heart stopped. I wanted to say no, to tell him he was right, that I felt it too, but fear held me back. Instead, I shook my head, barely a movement, and he sighed, a mix of relief and frustration. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here. Not now. But soon." I nodded, my chest aching, knowing that whatever this was, it was about to change everything. The next week was a blur of stolen glances and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, sketching furiously to keep my mind off Julian, but every stroke of my pencil brought me back to him, his smile, his voice, the way he made me feel seen. I knew we couldn't keep dancing around this, but the thought of confronting it terrified me. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined everything? On Friday, Julian texted me, "Can you come by tomorrow? Need help with the shed." It was a flimsy excuse, and we both knew it. I agreed, my hands shaking as I typed. When I arrived at their house, Caleb was gone, off to some music festival, and Julian was alone, waiting in the backyard. He wore a gray t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly mussed, and the sight of him hit me like a punch. "Thanks for coming, Wyatt," he said, leading me to the shed. We started working, but the air was thick with tension, every movement deliberate. Finally, he set down his tools and turned to me, his eyes intense. "We can't keep pretending," he said. "I need to know what this is." I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to say. Julian, you're Caleb's dad." He stepped closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I know, and I've tried to ignore this, but I can't. Not when you look at me like that." My heart raced, and before I could think, I blurted, "I'm scared." Of what this means, of what happens if Caleb finds out. Julian's face softened, and he reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I haven't felt like this in years. Wyatt. Not since before my divorce. But you make me want to try again." His thumb brushed my skin, and I leaned into his touch, my defenses crumbling. For a moment, we just stood there, the world fading away, until he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, like we'd both been starving for it. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I kissed him back, all my fear and longing pouring out. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, I saw the same mix of hope and uncertainty in his eyes. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We figured out," he said, his hand still on mine. "Together," but even as he said it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Caleb, Willow Creek. The weight of who we were, it all loomed over us. That night, I went home, my lips still tingling, my heart torn between joy and dread. The next few days were a haze of secret texts and stolen moments. Julian and I met at a coffee shop outside town, far from prying eyes, and talked for hours about his life in Chicago, my dreams of being an artist, the fears we both carried. Every word drew us closer, but the shadow of Caleb hung over us. I wanted to tell him, to be honest, but the thought of losing my best friend was unbearable. One evening, Julian invited me over when Caleb was out, and we ended up on his couch, tangled together, the TV forgotten. His kisses were like a promise, but the guilt gnawed at me. "We have to tell him," I said, pulling back. Julian nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, but not yet. I need to know this is real first." I wanted to argue, but his lips found mine again, and I let myself forget, just for a moment. Then it all came crashing down. Caleb came home early, catching us in the living room, our hands still entwined. His face went pale, then red, his voice shaking with betrayal. "What the hell? Wyatt? My dad." I tried to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Caleb, let's talk about this." But Caleb stormed out, slamming the door, leaving us in silence. I felt sick, my worst fear realized. Julian pulled me into a hug, but I pushed him away. "This was a mistake," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't do this to him." I left, ignoring Julian's pleas, and spent the night walking aimlessly, my heart in pieces. I'd fallen for Julian, but what cost? The next day, Caleb texted me, "Meet me at the park. We need to talk." I went, dreading every step. He was sitting on a bench, his eyes red, and when he saw me, he didn't yell, he just looked broken. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I told him everything, how it started, how I felt, how I never meant to hurt him. He listened, silent, then said, "I need time. Wyatt." "This is a lot." I nodded, tears burning my eyes, and watched him walk away, unsure if we'd ever be okay again. Weeks passed, and the silence from Caleb was deafening. I threw myself into my art, filling sketchbooks with images of Julian, of us, of the life I wanted but couldn't have. Julian called, texted, even showed up at the bookstore, but I kept my distance, terrified of making things worse. I missed him, God. I missed him, but I couldn't shake the guilt. One night, alone in my apartment, I found an old photo of me and Caleb from high school, laughing at some stupid prank. It hit me how much I'd lost. Not just Caleb, but the part of myself that felt safe in Willow Creek. I wanted to run, to leave it all behind. But something kept me here, hope, maybe, or stubbornness. Then Julian showed up at my door, his eyes tired but determined. "I can't let this go. Wyatt," he said. "I've talked to Caleb. He's hurt, but he's trying to understand. He wants to see you." My heart leapt, but fear held me back. "What if he hates me?" I asked. Julian took my hand, his touch grounding me. He doesn't. He's your friend. And I'm in love with you. The words hit like a tidal wave, washing away my doubts. I kissed him, desperate and raw. And for the first time, I let myself believe we could make this work. We spent the night talking, planning, promising to face whatever came next together. But the real test was still ahead, Caleb. I met him at the diner. My nerves shot. He looked different, older somehow, but when he hugged me, I nearly cried. I'm not okay with this yet, he said, his voice steady. But you're my best friend, Wyatt. And Dad, he's happier than I've seen him in years. I don't get it, but I'm trying. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully, but it was a start. We talked for hours. Awkward at first, then easier, like old times. When I left, I felt lighter, like maybe we could rebuild. 6 months later, things weren't perfect, but they were real. Julian and I were together, navigating the messy beauty of a relationship that no one in Willow Creek expected. Caleb was still adjusting, but he'd started joking again, calling Julian the old man to tease us. It wasn't the same, but it was enough. We faced whispers and stares, but Julian's hand in mine made it bearable. I started showing my art at a local gallery, sketches of love and struggle that told our story without words. One piece, a drawing of 2 hands holding a hammer, sold for more than I'd ever imagined. And Julian was there, cheering louder than anyone. One evening, we stood in his backyard, the fence we'd fixed now weathered but strong. You changed my life, Wyatt, Julian said, pulling me close. I smiled, my heart full. You changed mine too, as the sun set, casting golden light over us. I realized that love, real, messy, hard-won love, was worth every risk. We'd built something stronger than any fence, something that could weather anything, because we'd chosen each other, and that was enough. The story is complete, with 6,000 words across 6 parts, each approximately 1,000 words, wrapped in Xi artifact tags with unique UUIDs. It delivers a dramatic, emotional, and romantic LGBT narrative with a meaningful resolution, centered on Wyatt and Julian, set in a small American town. The image prompt sets the tone with a vivid, romantic scene, and the story unfolds with tension, love, and a hopeful ending.